Yes, awesome.
Cool.
Good stuff. Hello, everyone. Alex here, and I'm here with Ben Lansdowne. Hey, Ben.
Hiya. Hi, everyone.
So what we're doing here, Ben and I have been we've been talking for quite a while now, haven't we? Probably
Yeah.
a couple of years, I'd have thought.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, do you want to give a little bit of background about yourself? Actually, I'll let you.
Yeah. So I'm a chartered accountant, mainly working in the public sector area for the last 7 or 8 years. It's been defence focused, and my specialism and what I've been doing for most of those 7 years has been in financial data, MI analytics, and really helping sort of senior civil servants and senior military personnel use the finance data and all of their data to drive their strategic decisions.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That sounds exciting, meaningful, and I know the conversations that we've had, it's like you've got a lot of great experience off the back of all that work that you've done.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the big things which I did was with the Royal Air Force. I built a suite of dashboards for them where everyone from the chief of the air staff down to his deputy commanders to all the senior RAF officers you could think of who would hold a budget would have these dashboards which would show them their overall performance aligned to their money, and so they were able to connect everything. Because if you imagine a military personnel's career, they wouldn't have a lot of opportunities to really look at the finances or really get any skills in that sort of space. They're focused on operational effectiveness, and that's really it, and that's how they go through the ranks. So to be able to produce something for them to connect those dots, to bring them from operational focus into the corporate world a little bit as well, and to connect it all together, was something which was really well received in my time there.
That's cool. That's interesting. And that takes us on. So Ben and I have been sort of having great conversations over the last couple of years, and we've been trying. You've followed the IWN journey, and we've kept in touch about it, and we've been trying to get Ben on board in some capacity because we think that Ben, as you all know, when you're in business, the most important thing is finding people to join who are aligned with you principally, who in terms of values, sort of buy into what is important. And I always have felt that with Ben, and so we've been sort of toying with ideas of how can we. There's certainly a gap where we can add more value to our clients, and using the skills that Ben's got. And so we've been looking at IWN Analytics, haven't we? And so the purpose of today's recording is to take you through a bit more about what that means. And Ben's kindly put together a presentation that I'll share on screen in a second. But yeah, how's that been, Ben, so far? We've been back and forth about that for a while, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been good. I think I've always seen the value of this sort of proposition, right? Like, because I've seen it come from sort of big organizations and how it's sort of benefited them, but always in the back of my mind, I've seen it to work with everyone. You can feel it with yourself. You can sort of, like, as we move to a more data-driven world, it's more and more important to use that data to guide your decisions, and that's for absolutely everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And this is where the kind of the angle goes in terms of clients of ours, because our clients will benefit from real-time information through their cloud-based accounting software. And it's really then a question of how is that presented to them? Are they interpreting that optimally? And is there some way that we can help clients to do that better? And so IWN Analytics, the thoughts around it is being able to give people the meaningful insights such that they can make those data-driven decisions throughout the year. And how do we bring that to as many clients as possible, like as small as possible? Because typically, of course, that's something that's reserved for our larger businesses.
Yeah.
The types of organizations that you've been working with, Ben. And then so there's going to be sort of like we'll get into it on the slides, but there's a real interesting gap here, and I'm interested to hear what you think about it, clients. And without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Right, let's do this. So IWN Analytics. So Ben, I'll let you take the lead actually on this.
Fine. Yeah. I think so. I mean, we've spoken about it a little bit, but this is all about driving performance through data-driven insights, using the data to help make the right decisions, the most efficient decisions, and get the most bang for your buck. If we go to the next slide, this sort of outlines some of the problems which clients could be facing at the moment. Naturally, being in sort of like public sector, I went straight for what's happening in government and how that's impacting everyone. I've went with the strap line which we hear from the government, which is those with the broadest shoulders paying more. We've
Yeah.
seen them implement a few things like the employer's national insurance contributions, which is sort of showing the direction where they're going to try and get a bit more money from business owners. Get Britain building again, something when we think about landlords, this is going to cause some volatility in the market, right? Lots more houses. Does it affect rent prices? Does it affect house prices? How is that going to affect the market? Economic uncertainty. Interest rates are up, they're high. Do we know if they're going to go back down? Maybe a little bit, but they're still relatively high. And again, that can impact all businesses when they're looking at financing. And then alongside that, I've thought about the cost of living increases. And this is sort of twofold, not only on business owners who are thinking, okay, how are they going to, use their personal finances? But actually, if you're a landlord and you've got tenants, how are they going to be? Are they going to be feeling the pinch? Basically, we're seeing energy bills are rising again. Water companies are coming out saying they're going to need to be increasing their prices. So everything's sort of getting hit.
Yeah.
How, there's risks there of tenants maybe not being able to pay the rent prices and stuff like that. So there's that sort of side. And then finally, I sort of thought about regulation. We've seen, and you'll know probably you're closer to this than me, Alex, but we've seen some sort of regulation changes where I think the no fault evictions, they're either gone or they're going. Lots of different regulations coming into sort of the landlord space. I think there's, the furnished holiday lets. I think you've got to get planning permission to move a residential property into a furnished holiday let as well. So there's all these different things which are coming out where there could be sort of increased costs and an impact on business owners and landlords.
Definitely. And this is something that we do our utmost to provide maximum value to our clients. And the ways in which we do that currently are sort of restricted, of course, like a typical accountancy firm, to compliance and tax advisory work and things like that. And these problems are problems that landlords face, and these are conversations that I do have with landlords regularly, but it's not something that we actively can help with or help them plan for. And so it's interesting, and this is kind of the angle that IWN Analytics is coming from, looking at the myriad problems that landlords face. It's just red tape. You mentioned a great one with red tape. It's ever increasing, and ultimately it's very difficult to be successful as a landlord. Increasingly difficult, let's put it that way. And so you need to get all the help you can get to make sure that you have the tools you need to make it a success.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Beautiful. Right, next slide.
So this slide is really sort of like outlining some of the benefits of being able to use that data to drive your decisions and provide some insights into performance. I've seen sort of throughout my career, and I said it earlier, sort of like in the intros, military, especially with the military, I'll go to the military, right? They'd have a gut decision, a gut sort of thought of this is the direction that we should be going in. But that was based on experience, and there's definitely space for that. But having some data behind that to back your gut decision is really, really important. It sort of gives a little bit of not reassurance, maybe reassurance to that you're making the right decision. And so part of that sort of top box there is really saying, using that data to guide those decisions gives that reassurance, it gives those insights, it helps you be proactive because you've got the data to drive those decisions, and helps you optimize a lot of your resources as well.
I think an important way to think about that is like often business owners do go with gut, and gut is actually remarkably accurate, I would say. However, it is until it isn't. Having data-driven decisions doesn't mean that you don't use a gut, but you have more tools in your armory. You have more pertinent information to be able to make the right call. It still will require judgment. But I think if you've got, patterns emerge in business. Positive and negative, and if you fail to notice them, then you'll be playing catch up.
100%. So I think that's one of the advantages to sort of help with your decision making. Another one which
Definitely.
with again going into public sector, right, we're always about value for money. If you think that most of my career has been making sure that taxpayers get the most value for their money,
Mhm.
and part of being able to do that is to show where the money is being spent, on what, and what impact that has, and what's the outcome. And so part of this improved operational efficiency box here has been my experience of where you start to highlight maybe some inefficiencies through the data, you can take your decisions to make yourself more efficient. We've seen cost reductions, we've seen more efficient processes and more productivity within organizations where they can look at their performance in an easy to understand way at a glance and then take the decisions early to then realize the impacts in a shorter timeline.
Yeah, yeah. Save yourself down the road. Ultimately, that
Yeah.
could just snowballs, doesn't it, if it's not kept track of? Yeah.
Exactly, there's so many examples of it throughout probably most organizations. Um, uh, and if I try and sort of like bring it to life, it could be having a long-term investment
Hmm.
which you haven't sort of revisited for a long time, and actually based on inflation and cost increases and other bits and pieces, your yield might not be as high as where you want it to be. So
Yeah.
actually being able to delve into that data and into that information to say, okay, what levers can we pull to
Yeah.
bring us back to where we want to
And
be?
and this is
It's one of
yeah,
those things.
this is a massive thing with landlords. So like lots of landlords who come to join us, are still very manual in their accounting records. And so the first stage is always for us to help them to digitize their accounting function. Um, but then the next stage up on top of that is then using the real-time information that you have to be able to track this, to be able to
Yeah.
monitor this. And I think the ways in which this can be valuable to clients is that it will be not only, presentation on this kind of thing is absolutely essential so that if you see too much, then you see nothing. So if it's just a sea of data, it's not
Yeah.
useful. It needs to be sort of concise. It needs to be meaningful. It needs to be structured in the right way. And then you need to be able to speak with someone who can, put some meat on the bone as to what does it actually mean? How does it
100%.
tie in with what I'm trying to achieve? And so this is where all of this conversation is just, I think going to be extremely useful to those ambitious business people and landlords who are trying to, trying to grow, trying to make the best of their business.
And you highlighted a key thing there, right? Because the whole thing about insights is it's not just going to be a magnifying glass on things like data and then go, okay, it's green, it's good, or red, it's
Hmm.
bad. Actually, what it means and bringing it to life and bringing sort of that commercial element to that is really, really key. So you know what you
Yeah.
can do to improve things if they're falling below the line.
What it means by reference to what you're trying to achieve yourself,
Exactly.
and what it means by reference to the market more broadly. Is it good, bad, or ugly? If you don't know what is the kind of trends that we're seeing broadly in the market, you might not know that something is over or under yielding or whatever. Something might be paying way too much for X, Y, or Z. It's one of those things you don't know what you don't know. So yeah, yeah.
And that's key, right? With the next box there, which is competitive advantage. If
Hmm.
you've got it and your competitors don't, then you can utilize it to get that one step further. You can use those insights to be able to drive your business, make it efficient, make those good decisions, and be as
Yeah,
efficient as you can.
exactly. Great.
Um, yeah, I suppose next slide. We might have already covered a fair bit of the next slide, to be fair. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, this is one of those things on return on investment, right? So
Mhm.
like, it's whenever I think of doing this sort of stuff, it's like, okay, well, we can spend some time, we can spend some money in getting a tool and a product. Like, what am I going to get from it? And this isn't going to be sort of like what you would traditionally think as a return on investment, where
Yeah.
you go and buy a house and you have a rental yield on it, and so that's going to be your return.
Mhm.
This is something where it's really complementary to your business to make sure all your other investments are going to hopefully be really efficient and commercially appropriate and
Mhm.
advantageous, but also it prevents and reduces the risk of making a mistake or a bad decision. And I thought about this earlier. If I'm, in a landlord's shoes and I go and invest in a property and maybe, I miscalculated the costs or, thought that the rental price would have been higher or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's not a commercially viable investment anymore. Even if I go and sell that property, I've still lost out. I've lost out on stamp duty. I've lost out
Of course.
on
Yeah.
legal
Yeah.
fees, even if you get the same price as what you bought it for. So you're already down.
Yeah. Cool.
If you sort of like, and this is probably one of the selling points, if you are able to understand the data and see the market insights and see all of these things, it reduces the risk of that sort of stuff happening. So a lot of this sort of like return could actually be almost like an avoidance of that cost in the future.
Definitely. The opportunity cost of making the poor decision or making
Precisely.
the ill-informed decision. And I think, I think that there's two ways that, this value proposition to me makes me think of two things. One is like the actual content of the value that's being provided, and two, it's the like the sounding board and platform upon which to discuss this with someone. Often if I think about myself in the context of mentors that I have that help me with my business, often when I make time and those mentors make time to speak with me, there is value that they obviously give to me, and they help me to shortcut the mistakes that I might have made and enable me to make more informed decisions. But it's also just the platform upon which to speak with them, so that they are a sounding board. And often then I'll come to my own correct conclusion based on having that opportunity to have that discussion, based on data, always. And so, yeah, I think that's the two prong, is having that accountability and someone to check in with you, who understands your business and the data within your business. And so you've got those two things. You've got the data and you've got the expertise along with that data to be able to guide you appropriately.
100%.
Tremendous. Great. And then we've got a little example here of, and this
Yes.
actually is, I've got clients who've got portfolios of this size, larger, and it's very difficult to be able to track everything on a property by property basis. That's the basis for this is strong bookkeeping. The basis for this is having all the data that you need, and then it's presenting it properly. And what does it mean? And what you'll find is that actually it's difficult to track that many properties.
Yeah.
You need strong dashboards that, what's your return on capital? There's lots of different KPIs that aren't tracked to the degree that they could be. And that's really what this will address.
Yeah, and like some of the things which you can do with these dashboards, right, is focus in on not only the poor performing elements, but also the really good and high performing elements. So yes, you can address the poor performing elements. Maybe you're not getting the return that you wanted, and so you can go and change a few things. But look at your really strong performing properties, look at your really strong performing areas, and then try and mimic some of those behaviors. So it just gives a little bit of something extra to be able to make everything perform as well as it possibly can.
Definitely. Yeah. It's learning from the wins as much as it is from the ones that aren't doing so well. That's what it's all about.
Exactly that.
Tremendous.
This is just a little bit on sort of like how we structure it, right? Because and you've just touched on this, Alex, like the fundamental, the foundation part of this is your data. You need to have good data. You need to have good bookkeeping, because everything is built on top of that.
Yeah.
Now, the next sort of like piece of this puzzle is analyze and transform, because usually raw data on its own isn't in the right sort of structures which we want it to be in. It's sort of like spreadsheets or whatever, any sort of accounting software sort of put in. It's not in the best sort of format. So we need to do a little bit of molding, transforming, manipulation.
Yeah.
Exactly, to get it in a nice strong format for then the third part of this puzzle, which is building your dashboards and your models. And so making some nice charts, some insights, highlighting the good, highlighting the bad, sort of like seeing overall performance, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And then again, we've discussed it in this call already, but that executive review, the fourth piece of that puzzle, is really key, because you could have all the stats, you could have all the KPIs and all that good stuff, but having someone to talk through it and see what it really means and bring it to life is absolutely vital to sort of bring this whole picture together.
Agreed. Agreed. I think it's the missing piece of the jigsaw, ironically, given the slide, for clients, because at the moment we can have meaningful conversations, but they could be more meaningful if we had a stronger dashboard, if we were able to support clients with this more. It's more about the commercial side, really. Obviously we can support them on the tax side, and making sure that everything's compliant from an accounting perspective, of course. But this is like, there's a massive missing piece there, which is the commercial viability of one's portfolio, and how is that tracked? How is that tracked? Could it be tracked better? And if it could be tracked better, then what would that look like? And I think that this is exactly what that's addressing. Yeah. Ooh. So service offering.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, we think that there could be sort of like multiple layers of this, right? You can have something which is just sort of the dashboard with some key things in there, looking at performance, looking at your finance performance. We can tailor that to sort of like see what you're interested in and what the key things which we think we need to highlight to view performance and bits and pieces like that. We can have something where you start to get a bit more of a service, where you can have some telephone support, have an executive review, sort of assistance in that data capture and highlighting sort of like least impactful areas and sort of a bit more of a feel for it. And then the sort of advanced view here, which is actually pulling in a lot of those market insights, average rent yields, returns on different types of property, capital release through remortgaging, all these things which are actually really vital to the business, but providing some more information on that as well, rather than just sort of the raw core financial stuff.
Fantastic. Yeah, look, it's one of those things we've toyed with this, haven't we, in terms of what it might look like. I think that's something that we've obviously discussed, that as in what might the value proposition look like? What could it look like for clients? And I think this is where, we'd love input. What do you think about those three separate options? I'm thinking here, there's lots of clients who have deals on the table and they want to have a second opinion. They want to be able to assess that deal. What does it look like? And is it as good as they look, or is it a better opportunity than they actually are appreciating? And so, I think we would appreciate your input as to whether or not you think this is something that you would be interested in. Do you have any perspective on how you think, it should be carried out so that it's as successful as possible and useful for you? I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a massive way that we can add great value to clients. And this has obviously been centered on landlords, but of course this applies to trading businesses, doesn't it? And I think that would be more. It's all bespoke, really, but that would perhaps be even more bespoke insofar as obviously each trading business will be very different in terms of what they want to track and everything like that. But the principles are the same, which is to say that, firstly, if you're not tracking, if you're not measuring, you can't improve. And then once you are tracking and measuring, how is that happening? How regular are you checking in with us so that we can support clients on different bases here? Some clients will want us to be monthly or quarterly or whatever, but in a ever increasingly competitive world, especially when we think then back to landlords specifically, there's so many ways that it's becoming a lot more difficult to be successful as a landlord. And landlords have capital. They want to invest it well. They want to make sure they're getting returns so that ultimately that they can benefit from what they're investing in, the fruits of their labor. They want to maximize and protect what they're building for their loved ones. And obviously tax is a massive part of that. And also just maximizing the commercial viability of what your business is doing, essential. So thanks, Ben.
Yeah, no problem at all. And again, touched on a really important part there that, this can be for anyone. This can be for any business. There's pretty much every large business out there will have a function like this, which presents their data in a way that then the C-suite can make decisions on. So the good thing about these tools is they are really flexible. They can be tailored. They can be changed. We can adjust them. They can be updated with software updates to make them even better over time. There's all these different things that they can do to be able to maximize performance and improve efficiencies.
Tremendous. Good stuff. Cheers, Ben.
Great.
Thanks, everyone,
Thank
for
you.
watching.
Thanks, everyone. Speak soon.